My dear friends, these words, abide in me, contain the whole of the spiritual life in general, but the contemplative life in particular. And I'd like to just dwell for a few minutes on what that means for each one of you here. You know that a soul in a state of grace is a temple, and Teresa of Avila, for instance, was given a supernatural intuition or vision of the beauty of a soul in a state of grace, crystal clear and a real temple. That has consequences, corollaries. In the rule that I was under for years in France, the Carthusian rule, there was one phrase which has always stuck with me, and it was this: we do not raise our voice out of respect for the guest in the brother. And it was a whole ethos in which one lived physically, lived out the implications of being a temple. One created an atmosphere bathed in an extension of the peace of the guest. And one created also that same system for anyone around us. Now, you see how to lack in that is to destroy not only the atmosphere, but the interior atmosphere of one of the brethren. Look at your own day. One can do that subtly in many ways. One of the most frequent is that of invading a person's right to space. Unfortunately, even in otherwise holy souls, people who pray a lot, this specific fault of not being delicate, of not allowing a person to be, of invading, is hugely common. Very few people really, and I mean really, know how to, as it were, respect, honor, and indeed adore the presence in the tabernacle before one. I mean a human tabernacle, because one invades by not allowing a person to express himself or to have his mind. One does not allow a person to finish and to say all that the person wanted to say. And the more I look around, the more I see how few people actually do know what the art of listening is all about. Now, it's linked also with this gospel, because the gospel talks about pruning. The Father prunes. Now, in the specific life of being indwelt, of the life of contemplation, which we're all called to in the beyond, because that's what we'll do for all eternity, and therefore by anticipation also here. Because if we're dwelt in, we look at our guest and we dialogue with him. One specific element is this: leakage. Now, as in a conversation, much energy is coming out of all the pores of our being when we talk. And by the way, a high proportion of communication actually is bodily. A lot is said through a person's physical comportment. Observe life. Having said that, we are all the time leaking. Now, do you see how in our day, if we are always leaking our interior energy, we are being progressively drained. We are less self-sufficient, less rich. observe your day. How many words go into you and come out of you? Some you cannot avoid, others you certainly can. It makes a huge difference to your capacity to listen to your interior guest if you are tendentially, willingly consenting to having unnecessary words coming across the air into you. I mean artificially. One immediate question then is, do we need to have artificial noise? Then there is another. Every word is a dynamic, is an element of dynamism, for bad or for good, being emitted by another entity, another soul, another mind. Now, if we are all the time willingly taking in all these dynamics, all the time, we are not ourselves. We are other people's. We are on loan. We are prostituting our interior. We are not having our sacred space. Now, our day, look at it objectively, can be all the time that of taking in these words. We don't have to be in every conversation and remain there. But not just noise, noise also in the form of messages written and coming from various means of communication. Because every sentence coming into a tranquil mind complicates it and takes away its virginity. It is someone else's, e.g., if all the time one is alone, one has the itch to open up a means of communication. The most immediate is this one. Observe. What do you do the first moment you're alone again? Is it not true? And how many are actually in control of this and not being controlled by it? This particular one is always on silent mode, just a small vibration to alert me and no one else. It's a huge difference. One is in control and not being controlled by. One doesn't have to be all the time, immediately at everyone's beck and call. Go from this to other gadgets. Most of us would have access to internet, at least passively, and that's a question also. Now, passive internet is already pretty big. Why? Observe what happens when you go into internet. Is it or is it not true that you don't stay with what you went in to look at? Do you not tend also to look at what that's linked to, and on it goes? And is it not true that 10 minutes becomes an hour quite easily? Therefore, what's happening at that point? Our interior, is it self-sufficient? Is it not true that psychologically, once one is on a screen, one is actually being drawn into that screen? And the more that one gets into powerful communication with the internet sphere, cybersphere, the more insidiously powerful and sucking in it is, because YouTube's taking all the imagination. And you notice what happens at the end of a YouTube. Another one comes in linked to it. What do? How many resist? And another one comes up. And the degree at that point of your looking in at him, where's it gone? Okay, we get it back. We have a moment of adoration. Now be honest. The first 10 minutes, where's it spent? With all that clutter coming in, and all the noise in the head. And how many actually have the courage not to be accessible even at that point to their mobile phone? Now, if one goes through this innings of life in that mode of being on the outside of our inner sphere and temple, things also happen. This actually came to me this evening, and I thought I would quote it to you just as it came out of the mobile phone, because it was somebody who wanted to come here this evening. A lassie who was studying in Trinity College in Dublin with her family, but this message came in. They had to go to a funeral, but wait for it. What had happened? A person of her age, roughly. What happened? She was in the passenger seat, and her boyfriend was driving. He was drinking, and she hadn't her seatbelt on. The car hit a wall and spun all over the place. So do you see the kind of thing that by consequence risks happening? That we go at high speed over life and crash into the last moment without a thought or a preparation, waking up with all eternity before our eyes. Now that's kind of serious stuff. And you see how the enemy of the soul, gigantically in the Western Hemisphere, is doing pretty well that to all the young people. I mean, by getting them away from their interior. Get them to do anything at all but stop and think. Get them always outside themselves. Make sure they're not pausing for any length of time. And observe. Look at the young person. Pretty well all the person's day is linked with words. What's going on their ear? They've got these earphones. They're all the time twiddling away, even if they're standing before you. And when they're alone, they're straight away in internet. Chatting also with their friends, even playing games with their friends online. It's all virtual reality, miles away from their interior and what they're here for. It's not just the mode, it's not just the fashion. It's something satanically, insidiously dangerous and damaging to their souls. And not just one or two, but the whole culture is going that way. Because what are they getting in the way of recreation? Powerful impulses, draining impulses, music which is damaging their psyche and is not actually beautiful or musical at all. Rap is horrid and even worse in its words. Compared with only when we were young, it was not quite that. Long live the Beatles, I would say. But there is more. We too are at risk. Because all the time we're more or less navigating close to other people who by now are on a different wavelength. Therefore, it's as though we were exposed to viruses. A soul not in a state of grace is not either in a state of peace.